Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Doomer Optimism podcast. Ashley here with Mary Harrington, somebody I've been trying to get on and is finally somewhat free because her book is finally being published. Mary, welcome. Why don't you give our audience a brief bio of yourself, because I find that to be less awkward than trying to give somebody their biography while they're sitting here. And then let's get into talking about your book a little bit.
Sure. I'm Mary. I'm a writer at Unheard, which is a UK-based digital magazine that covers politics and current affairs. I fell into writing completely by accident about the age of 40, having done all sorts of different things. Some jobs more respectable than others, but it's fun so far, and it's been a bit of a wild ride. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else do you want to know?
You're a writer.
Yeah, no.
And how would you describe, I guess, your point of view, your perspective? Do you call it you? I mean, I think you are the original reactionary feminist, because maybe you could explain how that term came to be. That's a cute one.
I stuck it on my Twitter bio as like the culmination of a long-running argument I had via Twitter DM with a friend over whether or not post-liberal was actually a thing. And he contended that post-liberals are just reactionaries that don't inhale. And I was like, and the argument went on for ages. And eventually I conceded. I was like, okay, you win. Post-liberal is, yeah. So I changed my bio at that point, just as a way of conceding, without just to see how long it would take to notice. I changed my bio from post-liberal feminist to reactionary feminist, and then about a month after that, First Things wrote to me to say, this is a very arresting phrase. Would you like to write something for us to explain what you mean? And I was like, well, that means I have to think about what I mean, because I don't really know at this point. So then I sort of reversed it, and I realized that I did actually mean something by it, but explaining that took more mental effort than I expected to kind of explain that concisely in 1,500 words. And the piece is still there, Reactionary Feminism. It's on the First Things website. You can go and look it up. And it gives a concise definition of what I mean by reactionary feminism. But really, the very sort of too long didn't read version is that it's the upshot of 10 years of trying to figure out what it looks like. Is it possible to be a feminist if you don't believe in progress?
Right.
The short answer is not really, but the long answer is quite long. And the long answer is kind of, it's an entire book long when I just finished writing that book.
Yeah, so I guess let's get into that. You finally have, it's not yet available, but it is coming soon. And let's talk a little bit about your book. When does it come out?
It publishes on the 1st of March in the UK. US date is to be confirmed, but it should be not long after that.
Okay.
If not simultaneous, it may well be simultaneous. I'm not sure, but I mean, you can actually pre-order the ebook now on Amazon.
Okay.
And various other reputable non-Jeff Bezos outlets, if that's more your thing.
What is the? Sorry,
I got the typeset PDF for proof back today. And so I've started reading it through, and it's kind of really emotional actually to see my words actually typeset in a PDF. It feels completely different.
Yeah,
it feels like it's somebody else talking. I'm like, oh, I wish I'd written. Hang on a minute, no, I did write that. That was me. Wow, this is amazing.
And that's really cool. And it must feel really good, like the culmination of this arc where you're, fundamentally just trying, working out your ideas out loud, it more or less in the public forum, writing articles, seeing how people react, interacting with other thinkers. And now finally, okay, I'm going to put it all down in one book, long form book. Must feel great at this moment.
Yeah, it's really wild. I mean, yeah, to be honest, that is pretty much exactly what happened. When I sat down to figure out what it was that I actually wanted to say, I basically compiled all of the Unheard columns I'd written about women over the course of about a year and a half. And I was like, if I put these in order and made them into a coherent argument, what does it actually say?
Right.
And then that became, I think, the first 2/3 of the book, or it was the first half of the book, maybe. And then I realized that actually what people wanted to know about was the kind of body horror, cyborg, post-human future stuff.
Yeah,
the HR Geiger. stuff, which really feels like the kind of, the sort of bleeding edge of where we really don't, the world that we really don't want to be walking into, or certainly I don't want to be sliding into, feels like it's kind of already here, at least in some places. That's actually what people wanted, because there's not much discussion out there, not much collected kind of thinking, critical thinking about that. There's some sort of celebratory thinking, and there's some ideological terraforming, and there's some resistance, but there's a very little work being done to kind of theorize what's actually happening there, and try and connect it to larger arguments.
Yeah, I think
so. That's what ended up being the second third of the book, which is the cyborg theocracy bit, which is what sort of collects my thoughts on, where the ways in which we're now kind of, on the back foot in a war on relationships, just in general. Our relationships, the relationships between men and women, the relationships between mothers and babies, and our relationships with our own bodies. Then the last third of the book is probably the bit I'll probably get cancelled for. I'm going to get cancelled for the whole thing, but the most radioactive bit of the book is the what do we do now bit. Actually, some would be a kind of early draft of one of those chapters. I think you published at your, the Abolish Big Romance.
Yes,
is one of my arguments that you published at Doomer Optimism.
Yeah.
And there's more stuff. There's the feminist case against the pill, and there's some other stuff as well. It's going to be fun.
Okay. So let's just run through the basic argument of the three parts. Let's set aside more time for the what do we do now part, because we like to lay out the doom and then focus on the optimism here. As opposed to most other podcasts, which I think will just go deep dive on doom for most of the time they have allotted. Okay, so let's just basically, somebody's completely new to the idea of feminism against progress, like what's wrong with progress? What's the basic argument there? And then we'll go into the meat.
Very basic outline. I'm going to assume your people read Ivan Illich, and they read Karl Polanyi, and they read Karl Marx, and they read, this is your kind of collective optimist bookshelf, right?
Yeah.
So my argument is that the history of feminism as such is we shouldn't understand it as like an arc of moral progress in some absolute sense, but we should look at it in a much more grounded material sense as the aggregate response of men and women, but particularly women, to the way the Industrial Revolution transformed our life in common, our intimate lives, at the level of family and interpersonal, all that, the nitty-gritty stuff that makes up normal life. Because obviously there are, the industrialization transformed how people worked. And the critical change there for women was that work left the home. And where if you live in an agrarian setting, you're a sort of semi-subsistence farmer. Men in that situation, men and women both work, but men's work and women's work, as Illich talks about this in Gender, are very distinct, and that's structured by an immensely complex, culturally specific but consistently gendered sets of social codes and norms and behaviours, and particular sets of tools which are specific to gendered work. And while the details of that vary, it's consistently the case in pre-modern societies that all work is gendered in an interdependent and sort of agrarian or artisan setting, and that's just how people do things. And it's only with industrialization and sort of disembedding of work from that sort of that thick web of social relations that it becomes thinkable that men and women are interchangeable in any meaningful way. And fundamentally, my argument is that this is underwritten by technology. It transformed men's and women's lives in ways which really sort of set off the entire trajectory of feminism. Because obviously, if you can't work in the house, if you can't work and look after kids at the same time, because work is now in a factory or in an office, that sets off a whole load of concatenating changes in terms of women's standing and women's economic and political power relative to men, and so on and so forth. And women were not wrong under those circumstances to demand legal changes to the way households were, to the fundamental units of In the pre-modern setting, the basic unit of the polity was a household. It wasn't individuals as such.
Right.
But that doesn't really work in the modern context, because women couldn't hold their own in terms of economic agency in anything like the same way. It might seem counterintuitive now to think of women losing agency with the transition to industrial civilization. But if you think, I mean, I'm sure you'll recognize something like this, Ashley, from your own setting at home. If you work in a homestead, it just doesn't make sense to say that one sex is subordinate to the other, because you're both doing the work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even if you could have a sort of formal, everyone's pretending that the men are in charge, but in practice, that's just not how it works.
No. And I mean, I would just add, like, my little folk wisdom here that there are also certain jobs that are just obviously gendered.
Right.
Breastfeeding and pregnancy being one, but like even physical things, there are things that on the homestead that I just cannot do. I'm not strong enough to do.
Right, exactly. And I mean, crudely speaking, in an agrarian setting, the men produce raw materials, grain or meat or wool or whatever, and the women process it. But everybody's working.
Right.
And the common goal is producing the stuff that you need, either to sell or for subsistence, or for the family's needs. And it's not, almost irrespective of how things are organized politically within the larger context, within the intimate domestic context, it's just not meaningfully true that one sex is subordinate to the other, because that's not how it works in practice. And there are great anthropological papers actually about this, about how women exercise informal power in agrarian settings, in agrarian communities. And there's really interesting anthropology on this. The whispering campaigns, and the gossip which can be used to cause people to lose face or status, and immensely the kind of like village cancel culture, basically, which is totally women's domain. Yeah. In that sort of a context, and provides a totally it's a non-obvious, not very formal way of exercising power, but it's phenomenally effective.
It's very informal and probably very illegible to people who from the outside who aren't.
Exactly. And it's very hard to measure, and it's very hard to point at it and say, well, that's this is power. But it is in practice, and it's, there are,
Wait, I would just interrupt you for a second, because I'm giggling thinking about the longhouse. How does the longhouse fit into this model?
There's
your mind.
I think that would take quite a lot of unpacking.
Okay.
If I'm still setting it, like, let's come back to that.
Okay. Time. Okay.
Yeah, that takes some careful unpacking.
Yeah.
Anyway, so fast forward into industrial modernity, and all of these things all come apart, and instead women are in a position where the only way of exercising, of reclaiming some agency, well, they sort of fall into two typical responses to this predicament. So the old way of doing things is coming apart. The material conditions have changed. It just doesn't work anymore. So what do? Because family life still goes on. People, and there are two. This sort of takes two characteristic paths, which then form the kind of the two poles of feminism subsequently. And one is to say, no, actually, domestic life is good. The work of the home is good, actually. Being a bourgeois housewife, is important, meaningful work, and it might not be legible in market terms, but it still matters, and it matters because it's a space of respite outside the market. Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, the so-called cult of domesticity has been, some feminists read it as a sort of false consciousness, kind of propagandizing on behalf of the patriarchy, and I prefer to read it as women mounting a defense of a pre-industrial embedded form of sociality, which they might not have theorized it as such, but they recognized that stuff was still important, it still mattered. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't legible in terms of the market, and therefore they were going to construct a social space outside the market and say, no, actually, we're going to defend this, it still matters. Mm-hmm. And then so these are, and I read that straightforwardly as a feminist defense of the realm of care. Although it tends to be kind of treated as not feminist from the kind of liberal feminist historiographical point of view. But to me, it's straightforwardly, it's part of the same conversation.
Right.
But then the other pole of feminism is the feminism of freedom, which says, no, actually, like the only way we can exercise agency within this new order is to enter the market on the same terms as men. And so you have thinkers like Charlotte Perkins Gilman and Harriet Taylor Mill, who called for equal opportunities in the workplace, which is itself, which a very bourgeois knowledge class perspective,
right?
Because these were middle or upper class women, for whom the workplace meant, pen pushing, basically,
right?
And obviously, entering the marketplace on the same terms as men is not quite the same if the people in your immediate circle are, I don't know, they're
textile manufacturing or something.
Exactly. If you're a factory worker, it's a completely different ballgame. And the Harriet Taylor Mills and the Charlotte Perkins Gilmans just weren't very interested in thinking about that. It just wasn't a priority for them. And I mean, it's not like I'm the first feminist to point out that actually a lot of 19th century liberal feminism was very white and very bourgeois. This is not an original criticism. It's been made numerous times. But it's true. It's fundamentally true. The early liberal feminism was very preoccupied with the political and economic interests of upper middle class white women in the developed world. So that's sort of so you have these two, the feminism of freedom and the feminism of care, and up until my thesis is that up until the 1960s, those were sort of it was a tension, but it was a very fruitful tension. That that women were doing their best to kind of try and find a way of functioning both as sex dimorphic within the context of our specific reproductive role, and also as people within the which is just a very uncomfortable place to inhabit if a person in the generally accepted terms of your culture is kind of male standard by default, if you see what I mean.
Yep.
That you're on the back foot from the word go. And this is Illich's point. He says the transition from vernacular gender to economic sex structurally disadvantages women. Because the moment you have caring obligations, you're at a disadvantage in terms of the sort of atomized competitive marketplace.
Yeah, and I would just add from my own personal experience, and I think there's a lot of people increasingly like me who are well-educated, supposedly, upwardly mobile, or, the knowledge worker class. And it really came to a head around motherhood for me. Just being pregnant and then having a child, I realized it's basically, I can choose, I only have a set amount of hours in my day. I can choose to keep going in my career and outsource motherhood to somebody else and not be with my children, or I can choose to be with them and then take some of my economic activity down my career. And it was really a moment where I just, was just forced to make a choice, and made the choice toward being with my children primarily and working only in a small amount. But I think this is something a lot of people are coming to realize, that there's really finite time. Once you become a mother, you're really forced into this terrible situation where if you're doing what you're supposed to do in your class, you really just you get your children ripped away from you fundamentally at a very young age, and it's extremely traumatic, and everything is subsumed to the marketplace, and that is the ultimate goal of life.
Absolutely. And so this is the kind of so this is the relatively uncontroversial part one of the argument. Part two, which sort of culminates in a point which I owe to Erika Bakayoko, who's an American legal scholar who's written, I think, convincingly about the fundamental paradigm shift that took place within feminism as a whole, at the point where the feminism of care was definitively defeated by the feminism of freedom, which in as she argues, happened legally it happened sort of definitively with the legalization of contraception and abortion. Because I mean, if you think about what legalizing abortion says, I'm so far entitled to freedom and personhood on the atomized model that this justifies even ending a pregnancy, which is about the most dependent a human being can be on another, is to be still gestating. I don't think it's possible to make the defeat of care more literally visceral than that. It says this is how much freedom matters, that we have a right to do that. And I've come sort of uncomfortably and reluctantly to the conclusion that this is metaphysically, what that change implies. Because I mean, previously I've been very, very unambiguously in the sort of safe, legal, and rare category, and I'm not completely sure where I stand in relation to all of that now. But the more I thought about it, the more clear it's been to me that that there's an absolute fundamental hinge moment in so many other things. And I've come to think, and I've come to argue, that the legalization of abortion, which happened almost concurrently with the invention of the internet, took us into a completely new era. At that point, in the 1960s, we left the industrial era, which we haven't been in it. We've been in for 50 years now in what I call the cyborg era, which you might also call the transhumanist era. I mean, and abortion and contraception are the first transhumanist technologies, and the only reason we don't think about them as such is because they're so normalized. But the point at which medicine shifts from restoring things that have gone wrong with normal to treating normal as a medical problem in need of solutions is the point where we made the shift from restorative to a transhumanist paradigm in medicine, and the changes that have rippled down through our culture and downstream of that have combined with the changes brought in by the digital revolution. We can sort of sum up generally as virtualization, dematerialization, financialization, decentralization, and also some pretty radical effects on our discourse and how we think about politics, and all of those things have those changes are now so generalized and well embedded that it's becoming obvious. But it all started some time ago, and the point at which we might have been able to do something about it is some considerable distance in the rearview mirror. So we are where we are now. Yeah. So this is the doom.
Yeah, okay? yeah. And I would just add to that, and maybe we can get into this a little bit now. The part of the doom. I think that there's a parallel with ecological issues insofar as early on in the process of, accelerating technology, people are told this sort of Faustian bargain, like we're going to be liberated from this, work, from the toil of being a human, the toil of, or like the limitations of nature, which have thus far kept humanity down. And, just technology is going to unleash all this potential, and not thinking about the potential side effects of that. And I think there is, early on in that, people still say something like, do people who are living on islands in Tonga or something, do they not deserve electricity like us? This kind of thing. Like, how could you keep these basic technologies away from people? But then there's just this slippery slope where there's just all these sort of just results of accelerating technology that nobody foresaw, and now everybody can see it, and we're so far into it, it's very hard to go back. I don't know. So I'm wondering your thoughts on the ecological aspect as well.
Well, I mean, the ecological case against the pill is even stronger than the feminist one, so we should probably, I don't know.
Yeah, get there. Yeah, let's get there. That's fine. Yeah.
I mean, are we going to go straight there, or are we going to?
No, let's go. Let's go. No, let's go through the book, and then we'll come back to that point, the ecology.
So the second third of the book I spent unpacking some of the ways in which the cyborg era has, the tech transition into the cyborg era has specifically impacted our human life in common, which is a sort of family life considered more broadly, the relations between men and women, and the relationships between mothers and babies, or parents and children, but particularly mothers and babies, and the relationships we have with our own bodies. So that looks at that looks at how or even if people form relationships, and what and what the cyborg era has done to that. So I've looked at dating platforms and OnlyFans and all the sort of pathological symptoms, and I've tried to draw out the common themes there. My argument there is that everything which is sold as a liberation that's underwritten by tech, invariably, it's embraced by utopians and celebrated as a liberation, in the hope, but what nobody ever seems to see is that the moment you liquefy all of those norms, it doesn't get rid of the fundamentals of human nature that we were trying to escape from. All that happens is that the market moves into the space. So the sexual revolution didn't get rid of the differences between men and women, either in sexual aggression or in physical strength or in mate choice preferences considered more broadly. But what it's done is commodify the differences between how men and women approach forming relationships and turn them into supply and demand problems. And so now you have this very hostile transactional norm of how people form of relationship formation, where men and women both. It's like what's going on is that men and women have both identified the other side's strategic weaknesses and their sort of normative longings, and treat them as vulnerabilities which can be exploited in search of whatever it is that. So men will. So some men, I'm not going to say not all men are like that, just like not all women are like that, but you see patterns where men in pursuit of no strings sex will exploit women's longing for affection and intimacy, right. Or women will exploit men's desire to look at hot young bodies to extract resources, and the whole thing has become. Trust bleeds away. The possibility of solidarity bleeds away, and what you're left with is this incredibly bleak, incredibly cold, and incredibly exploitative dynamic, in which it's very hard to see how anybody forms lasting relationships at all. And I mean, this is something that I hear anecdotally, and you can see it also in the data. Marriage rates are down, relationship formation is down, relationships are becoming more short-term, and even people having sex full stop is falling off a cliff, because it's just not possible to create any sort of ground for trust or intimacy in when the basic ground for forming and sustaining relationships has been so completely reordered to the market. I look at it and I just think this is horrific. And I'm not surprised that so many young people are just swearing off the whole thing and doing the kind of the erotic equivalent of lying flat, as they're just quiet quitting. I don't blame them. Because this is obviously sucks. So that's the war on relationships, where it comes to intimate relationships between men and women. It gets really grim when you get to the relationship between mothers and babies. Once you start liquefying that and then reordering it to the market, you're into commercial surrogacy, and you're into disassembling all of the component parts of conception, gestation, and nursing and so on. And I find this very hard to talk about, because I experienced the most visceral revulsion at the idea of commodifying those aspects of human experience, because to me they're so profoundly. It's just such a profoundly inappropriate thing to do. Yeah,
and to me, I would go. So if I would say sacred, like they're fundamentally sacred relationships. Yeah.
But I mean, none of that is to say, of course, that family relationships never go wrong, and that there's never been a mother who's abandoned her babies. Of course these things happen too. Right. But if you talk to most normal, kind of averagely psychologically healthy mother, and they'll tell you very similar stories about what it feels like when you hold your child for the first time. It's everybody knows what that. Everybody who's a mother knows what that is.
Yeah.
And the idea of turning that into a set of supply and demand problems just makes me so angry.
Yeah.
So there's a whole very angry chapter about that, the war on relationships there.
That's good, though. I do think very few people talk about that in the words that you use and the strong language you use. So I just want to acknowledge that that's like a service you're doing to us women who just don't have the words. I think most of us who are horrified, and we don't even know what exactly is going on. And I love the argument you're making about the totalizing effect of the marketplace and commodification here is really fundamentally what's behind it. So sorry, continue.
The sort of the point I've got to with all of my feeling is that this culminates in the war on the relationship we have with our own bodies, on the idea of embodiment as such, and the principal delivery mechanism for that at present is the social and legal campaign to replace sex dimorphism with gender identity, which, when you look at it a little bit more closely, is straightforwardly about privileging an inner, insubstantial sense of selfhood, privileging idea over embodiment, and this idea that our ideas of ourselves are radically separable from our physical selfhood,
right,
such that we're entitled to remodel that physical embodiment as though it's a sort of meat suit that is being piloted by some kind of invisible homunculus.
Yeah.
As my friend Alex Kashuta puts it, the homunculus piloting the meat suit.
Yeah.
And this is obviously a belief, not a fact, that there's some kind of invisible homunculus piloting a meat suit. But that's the basic paradigm that we're talking about here.
Well, and then now we have the tech to actually
right. And now
the medical industrial.
Yeah, it's inconceivable to think of people like that until you have the technology actually to try and put it into practice.
Right.
But that's where we are now. And this is again radically accelerated. I mean, it's accelerated partly by the liberal feminist idea that autonomy it should be prioritized over sex dimorphism and our obligations to and our that autonomy should be and that we're entitled to use technology to flatten sex differences, for example, via the transhumanist technologies of contraception and abortion. So that it has its roots there, but then it's radically accelerated by the experience of spending a lot of time on the internet. If you're very online, all these kids who've grown up, doing half of their socializing in a sort of disembodied space where they're not actually thinking about where they are now, and they're certainly not moving or engaging or even kind of touching one another. They're just typing.
Yeah.
Of course they think of themselves as homunculi piloting meat suits. And so, why would we be remotely surprised to find that, gender identity issues are absolutely skyrocketing in the young?
Yeah.
Why would we even? The only miracle is that it's as limited as it is. The only miracle is that they're not all doing it, because it's completely consistent with having grown up mostly online.
Yeah, and I would just add, it not just pick and choose your gender, but pick and choose your avatar, pick and choose if you want to be an attractive woman, pick and choose your attractive features.
If you've grown up being able to edit your avatar, why would you not edit your meat avatar as well?
Yeah, exactly.
But they're basically the same thing, right?
Yeah,
exactly. But my argument is that this is the end. The end game isn't gender identity. The end game is the deregulation of the human body. Yeah. The deregulation of all of living things, the abolition of whatever's left of the social and cultural standing for the idea that there is such a thing as human nature, because once you've abolished that and you've made that low status or cringe or just illegal or cancelable or whatever, it's then totally open, it's open season to biotech.
Yeah.
And at that point, you can splice human and pig DNA together to create organs for the transplant market. You've got the world is your oyster then. And if it succeeds, and I worry terribly that it will, the economic boom that results from deregulating human nature will be as immense as the boom was that came about after deregulating finance in the 80s and 90s, and the crash will be just as horrendous.
Yeah.
Except the crash will be it will be somehow in yet in as yet unimaginably horrific ways, kind of happening within our embodied selves, and not just in our financial lives. It'll be happening in our embodied lives, and I don't even want to think about what that's going to look like if we get there. But I'm at one level, actually, but one level, the argument I'm making is fundamentally an anti-capitalist one, that's saying hashtag Occupy ourselves. We lost the Occupy argument with big finance, but there might just about be time to win this one. Yeah. Occupy, it's an Occupy movement for the human body that says no, actually we're not homunculi piloting meat suits. We do occupy ourselves, and it stops now. It stops here.
Yeah. I just want to briefly read one line from a Substack you wrote recently. I was a radical leftist in my teens. Apart from the fact that I no longer believe in progress, my values haven't changed since then. I still oppose the dismantling of natural or human ecologies in the name of freedom, but to the benefit of big business. And I do feel like there is, I mean, it's right now in this moment where I think people who hold that set of values are realizing that progress is oppositional, or our idea of progress, meaning, you know, advancing freedom in the marketplace, is fundamentally opposed to that. And I think probably even the Occupy people didn't realize that. And this is the moment where I think people are coming to that realization.
Yeah. And this is an incredibly, I think if you're still committed to leftist social circles and, you know, sort of the broader kind of leftist paradigm, this is a very painful place to be, because nobody wants to be exclusionary and nobody wants to be judgmental. But I don't think it's possible to support trans rights in its current form and simultaneously to be an anti-capitalist. I just don't think that works. You know, I absolutely think it's possible to embrace people in all of their uniqueness, and including gender variance, as and when that's just occurring in how people want to be in the world. I don't see any reason why that should, but I think we have to occupy ourselves. We can't be treating ourselves as meat suits to be remodeled by big biotech. It's not those positions are not consistent.
Okay, so are we ready for the optimism?
Is that enough doom now?
Oh my god.
Okay, so I realized that was quite a lot of doom.
It's good though. You have to know the doom to be able to navigate what your options are. I suppose my fundamental reason to still be kind of an optimist, which I'm sort of maybe 85% doom, but in as much as I'm 15% optimist, what I hold on to is the fact, like, you know, one of the epigraphs in my book is from Horace, where he writes, "You can drive nature out with a pitchfork, but still she comes back." And he's complaining about this. I think if I remember rightly, he's complaining about living in the countryside and about the fact that it doesn't matter how hard you try and get the fucking weeds out from, or whatever. It's like the goddamn plants keep coming back, and it's just Yeah, and you know what? I would just add to that. Like, I mean, I hear so much like climate and environmental catastrophizing, but I'm here on 9 acres, and these plants they grow so quickly. They recover, like ecosystems move at such a rapid pace. There is so much resilience there. It's you actually are in,
but things want to live.
Yeah.
Things want to live. You know, life desires itself. Life desires life. So I hold on to that, and I hold on to that in the context of the human as well. I actually, you know, it might sound bleak to say it doesn't matter how hard you try and abolish human nature, because all that happens is the market moves into place, the market moves in. But what that also means, what we can also take from that, is the fact that you can't abolish human nature. We remain human. It doesn't matter how hard the machine tries to terraform us. It's not going to work. And I mean, you know, here we are talking to one another via a digital screen. You know, you and I are both complicit in the cyborg matrix too, right? You know, I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and this larger conversation wouldn't be happening if we weren't all, you know, complicit to some extent. But like, whatever, that's just, you know, we are where we are. And, you know, this idea that you can't critique something without also participating in it. I mean, it's an excellent meme. I'm sure you know the one I'm talking about.
Yes.
But you know, you're just like that. That's just a pointless rabbit hole to waste your energy on, right? You know, at the end of the day, you have to start from where you are, and where we are is, you know, complicit to an extent in the machine. But I just don't think the machine is going to win. I think it's probably going to be horrible in some ways, but I think we will remain human, because, you know, every effort to liquefy all of that just hasn't succeeded yet. But I also think that there are things. I also think there are, even just at the very granular interpersonal level, things that we can do that will make it easier to stay human at an intimate level. And I don't think all of these strategies apply to everybody, because obviously everyone's context is different, and the pressures on all of us are different. And actually, I had a hell of a time writing the last third of the book, because I started out trying to make it work for everybody. I started out trying to make it something that wasn't going to horrify all the different groups that I'm likely to horrify. And in the end, I gave up. I was just like, fuck it, and here goes nothing. And I just wrote it for very based female Zoomers, because that's just like, it's just too much otherwise. It was going to be too long. And like that's a small demographic, but they're real. They exist.
Oh yeah, no, but I would also just add, like, part of the thing that conclusion I've come to in terms of solutions is that wanting to have a global solution is a part of the problem.
Yes, exactly. Like, a reactionary feminism has to be anti-universalist.
Yes.
Like, this whole, obviously it has to be.
Yes.
And we have to start from where we are.
Yeah.
I sort of played with this idea that actually what we're trying, we should take a leaf from the Detransitioners book. Because actually what we're trying to do collectively as reactionary feminists is a kind of detransition,
right?
Out of like throwing ourselves fully at the mercy of the machine, for our quote unquote liberation. And in fact, detransitioning from that, figuratively speaking, means accepting, finding a way of making some kind of peace with our own bodies, which I find often difficult. It's hard. To make peace with your own body, especially when, every pressure of the culture is sort of pushing you in the opposite direction towards something sort of, objectifying and dissociative and sort of post-sex, if you like.
I would
post-dimorphism.
Yeah, I would just add from my own, again, folk experience to like give it an anecdote. I think just even being pregnant, nursing a baby, doing the work of the home for me was like a process of embodiment that if I were to have gone in the direction of, basically functionally an economic male working in an office, I wouldn't have had to been faced with any of those, the physicality of that. But just cleaning a house, just picking up my child, just being a body whose use is to like care and do physical work and meaningful work. It's a process of re-embodiment, and it's difficult.
And it's not that your brain stops functioning while you're doing that.
Yeah.
It's not like you stop thinking about stuff.
Right.
I did a lot of very good thinking when I was a stay-at-home mum. Yeah. I don't regret any. No, I don't feel like any of that was wasted time on a billion one different axes. Those were good years.
Yeah.
I recommend a stint as a stay-at-home mum to anybody who wants some embodied thinking time and embodied being time. Yeah, it's brilliant. But yeah, detransition for all of us. And I think, so I ended up writing specifically for women who are young enough that, like all of this, that they're still right at the coalface, in the sense that, the question, how do we form families is still a question with a lot of meaningful downstream consequences. Mm-hmm. Like, you and I are both, you're in your 30s, I'm in my 40s, where we both have our families, we have our households, we have our husbands, our situation is a little bit different. So I wasn't really, I don't really, it's not like you need my advice. In fact, you're quoted in the book.
Yes.
Very, very, very nicely quoted in the book. But yeah, I think there are, if you're still theoretically at least a kind of fairly loose, fairly free atom, and you're a woman, say in your early 20s or so, you have to figure a lot of this stuff out, and you have to negotiate. You're right at the sharp end when it comes to negotiating all of this stuff. Yeah. So I've sort of one of the suggestions I've offered for a way of thinking about it, which is not the current standard way, is to suggest that possibly the romantic ideal of marriage that we developed during the industrial era is part of the problem at this point, and that in fact we need to revert or re-engineer a 21st century version of the much more pragmatic medieval approach to marriage, which is to say, as the foundation for life in common, predicated on absolute loyalty, as a covenant rather than a contract. I call that abolish big romance. I see big romance as this sort of romantic industrial complex, which tells you that, the purpose, the reason for finding a life partner is to facilitate your self-actualization. You treat each other as consumer products.
Yes.
The moment somebody falls short on one of those metrics, you're entitled to kick them to the curb.
Yeah,
which is obviously not easily compatible with raising healthy, well-adjusted children. The statistics are unequivocal on that, which is, that's an uncomfortable third rail where, the feminism of freedom is concerned, but it's just true.
Yeah. I just want to add, I wrote this Twitter thread once about that topic about my marriage, and basically,
I remember. That was a lovely one.
and I got a great response, and I think there are a lot of young Zoomers who want this kind of information, basically. But just thinking, like, when I got married, I thought, I read all this conventional advice, like, to keep your marriage fun, make sure you have a date night, and this idea that, like, you need to make sure that your personality is interesting to be able to consume for the partner, as opposed to the fundamentally deeply romantic notion that your partnership and your shared work in a household and raising children and your shared vocations, all of that together is better than your atomized work as an individual to be consumed for your personality, your interesting personality or whatever. And just thinking, like, you made this household, you made this legacy, and that is fundamentally much more romantic in the end, to think it's possible only from your partnership and your ability to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So abolish big romance. That's my kind of suggestion number one. Suggestion number two is, well, I mean, this is quite a difficult argument to sum up without sounding a lot more provocative than I actually want to be. But I called the chapter "Let Men Be," and like the very outline of my argument is that it's the feminist case for good men, right? It's pointless to talk about forming relationships if there are no good husbands to be had. And my argument is that actually good men are not formed by women. Good men are formed by each other.
Yeah.
Young men, the best young men are mentored by good older men.
Yeah.
It follows from that actually we need to rethink the relentless feminist demolition of single-sex male spaces. And I've used that as a way into, or rather, I used the gender critical feminists' defense of female single-sex spaces really as a route into thinking about whether or not actually we need to extend that somewhat into re-evaluating how we understand all male sociality. And that, this is obviously this is sensitive territory. From all kinds of perspectives, and there are plenty of pitfalls, and there are plenty of landmines, and plenty of and it's very easy just to shoot it down by saying, well, look at this or that all male group, and aren't they being assholes, and we shouldn't do this, and besides the patriarchy and yada yada yada. And it's like, sure, you just hang on a minute, like, I'm talking about, like, at ground level.
Yeah,
at ground level, it's just like, men are killing themselves in escalating numbers, and working class men are fucked.
Yeah,
bluntly, I think this idea that all the way down the socioeconomic hierarchy we have to eliminate single-sex male spaces just so that a few barristers at the top get an equal shot at smashing the glass ceiling, I think is a grotesque injustice.
Yeah.
And that's something that and righting that injustice ought to be on the list of things to do for reactionary feminists. This is a hill I will die on. I don't care about whether or not Sherry Blair is allowed into the Garrett Club. And frankly, if the price of getting men's support for defending single-sex prisons is that Sherry Blair is not allowed into the Garrett Club, I'm completely fine with that, and so should everybody else be. Just it's not Sherry Blair. I really don't care.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I just think about it, like, growing up, there was like a good amount of hazing of, like, older uncles or older cousins to younger in men's spaces. And I just thought, like, I thought that was very normal, and I thought it was very good for everybody's development. And there's a very weird thing that happens, and I do think that there is like this HR devouring mother stereotype where really, I mean, there really is this shift that has happened where men are being sort of hazed by women, and it creates this very oppositional stance between the sexes where
my sense is also, I mean, I don't spend very much time spelunking in like the manosphere, but I spend enough time spelunking in odd corners of the internet for it to be very clear to me that the backlash will happen, and it will be horrible.
Yeah.
And I think that there is, you know, it might even be too late to stop it, but I'd prefer to think that, you know, we could make some effort towards mitigating it by, you know, trying to think a little bit more broadly about how and where it's actually just and appropriate for single-sex spaces to be defended across the board.
Right.
And you know, and why it's really in everybody's interests to do that.
It's paradoxical.
Even Cherry Bear's interests.
Yeah, I mean, it's paradoxical that men make better husbands and have better relationships with women when they've had single time with only men and single sex spaces and experience that sort of hierarchical, and not just that, but I think like it's well known in sociology, this crisis of masculinity, just being able to have like a vocation, meaningful work that like taps into those masculine needs, I think makes people better husbands.
It's obviously not for me to say what men get up to when women are not around. That's like, I don't care, and nor do I really want to know, to be honest.
Right.
It's not really that's by definition it's not my business.
Yes.
But if it's but I kind of feel like to the extent that the kind of HR industrial complex wants to make it my business, what men get up to when women are not around, things are going to get worse, and the crisis of masculinity will get worse, and the backlash will get worse.
Yes.
And the sort of escalating collapse of our capacity to interact between the sexes will get worse.
I'll just briefly
say husbands will get worse, and it's just so let them be. Just leave them the fuck alone a bit.
And I'll just say something really
just leave them the fuck alone a bit.
Yes. And I'll just briefly say I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, and there were boys' schools nearby, and there was something really fun, very Illichian that happened when we're separated. It's like this sort of mysterious thing, and they're all being, you know, stupid in the way that teenage boys are, and we're all being, you know, gossipy and girly in the way that teenage girls are. And there was a moment once where the boys broke into our school in the middle of the day and dressed like a girl. They got skirts from one of their friends or something and put a wig on, and were like running through the halls. And that was a real moment for me. Like, you know, there's something like, it's so fun, the difference, you know, and it really highlights that for me, I think.
Right. And no, so we've got abolish big romance, we've got to let men be, and then finally rewilding sex, which actually brings us back to the ecological thing.
Okay.
I mean, I started with the ecological case against the pill. Which is, I mean, I'm sure this is well known in your corner of things. You know, synthetic estrogen in the water table is disastrous for aquatic wildlife. This is well known. Yep. But every time somebody writes about it, it just goes straight down the memory hole again, because the pill is so fundamental to the cyborg era. So, like, you know, it's just la 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 la. Nobody wants to know about it.
Yeah.
But like, you know, Alex Jones is not totally wrong when he says, right, you know. You know, I mean, it's not completely wrong. I mean, he's sort of directionally correct, even if he's factually a bit off.
Yeah.
But, you know, the chemicals are going into the waters, which are messing around with the endocrine systems of frogs. Yeah. You know, then it's not literally turning them gay, but like something sort of in that zone.
Well, and happening. Actually, amphibians like have porous skin, and they're like the sex organs are the first things to change when there are chemical imbalances in the environment. So he's directionally correct.
He's directionally correct,
right?
And this, but I've taken that as a meta. I've taken the ecological catastrophe, the disaster of the pill for literal ecologies, aquatic ecologies, as a metaphor, and made the argument that the pill has proved a disaster for our social ecologies as well, and it's just as it's had as poisoning and corrupting an effect within our sexual ecologies. because of all the downstream consequences of flattening sex dimorphism. But basically, I'm sorry, my laptop just went. Make sure that for a second. Arguing that one of the most radical thing that young women can do in order to reclaim some space from the machine is to make sex properly consequential again by refusing to use contraception, it's a provocative argument.
This is the first time I'm hearing this. I'm like Trump right now. This is the first time I'm hearing this.
Well, I should, yeah. I mean, read the book when it comes out. But that's basically my argument. The only way we're going to make sex properly consequential again is by not using birth control.
Okay, so what is that? What happens then? What happens in this vision?
Well, for one thing, it liberates women from the pressure to put out in situations where they would otherwise, it liberates women from the whole Me Too scenario, because they have a absolutely cast iron reason to say no.
Right.
To every single Weinstein who's otherwise like, come on, what does it matter to you? Come on, come on.
Which was the case for most of human history. There was an actual reason, right?
Yeah. If you've got a robust, rock solid, it's like, no, I don't trust you. I don't trust you I don't even like you very much. Yeah. And sure, you're kind of hot, but I don't really know you, and I don't trust you, and like absolutely no way am I going to run a serious material risk of being impregnated by you. So no thanks.
Right.
So it liberates women from almost all of that casual, degrading, frankly nasty sex that increasing proportion of young women are now complaining about. This sort of normalization of the idea that you're just expected to put out and put out in sometimes really grotesque and degrading ways. 15-year-old girls getting anal prolapses because of some guys decided to try something from a porn film. Just really horrific stuff. And if women are like, no, we're not doing that because like it's massively risky for us, all of that, or most of that goes away. Which seems to me like it would potentially be quite nice and quite liberating, because you've got a solid answer to when people say, well, why not?
Yes.
Duh. so there's that. And I've perhaps even more provocatively, my argument is that most of this sort of really depraved BDSM kink stuff will also go away. Because my theory, I can't prove this, but I've argued it. I can't prove it with data because it's not something you can prove with data, but you can't take the danger out of sex. Sex is fundamentally consequential, it's fundamentally dangerous. It's the most profoundly intimate thing you can do with another person. And the reason sexual norms have become increasingly grotesque and increasingly degraded is because people have taken the consequences out of sex and then and are still pursuing that intensity. So, and my thesis is that if you put the real power exchange back in, which is to say the meaningful possibility of creating a child, then all of that BDSM power exchange, apart from truly depraved people, and there's always a minority of them, but in almost all cases, the desire to get that power exchange experience back into sex will just go away, or at least it'll be back in its proper place and ordered to its proper purpose. So this is not a I'm expecting a certain amount of response, but this is what I think, so I'm going to say it.
And I wonder if you foresee, and I've been thinking this for a while, that there really just seems to be like a bifurcation going on, where there's people who are just leaning into this and going full tilt, and then there are basically what you would maybe call the detransitioners who are just trying to
find ways of recouping some humanness.
Yes.
And I've called this rewilding sex because it's really about, I see this as a deliberate approach to rewilding our sexual ecologies, which means, and you can't rewild without the apex predators, right? You need the megafauna, you need the danger, you need the violence. It's all there. It has to be, because otherwise you're not really rewilding. And if we're talking about rewilding sex and restoring our sexual ecologies to their proper order, that means actually you have to follow through. That means no more.
And I wonder also, do you envision scenarios where maybe like how it used to be in the 40s and 50s, where people would be dating to marry, not necessarily married yet, but interested to eventually get married, and then, maybe having premarital sex, but in the context of dating someone that they're serious about, and then, having a shotgun wedding, like those kind of things coming back?
Possibly. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not proposing that we legislate for rewilding sex at this point. I mean, I propose all of this in the context of the revolutionary vanguard. I think there are, for those young women who want to push back, this is a program for revolutionary vanguardism. This isn't a program for mass legislative change.
Right.
I don't think we're anywhere near there yet. But plausibly, I mean, amongst those subcultures where people already eschew contraception for religious reasons or whatever, I imagine a scenario that, not unlike what you just described, is pretty much how things work now.
Yeah.
And should more men and women follow that sort of a line, I don't see why that wouldn't expand. I mean, the backlash against the pill is real, and it's spreading, and it's not just a religious thing by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
I think it's now just routine. It's become routine since I was a teenager to just put young women on birth control the moment they hit sort of 14 or 15.
Right.
And they say it's for acne, or it's for period pains, or it's for this, that, or the other. But it's just completely standard. And there are lots of women who get to their mid-20s and they stop taking it, and they're like, "Holy shit! I'm a completely different person."
Yeah. You know what? And
in the meantime, you've been peeing estrogen into the system, which is turning. No, it's not actually. Yeah, but Alex Jones is wrong.
I wonder whether or not you have some thoughts. I personally see the biggest potential overlap or dovetailing of ecological issues with health maxers, people who are realizing, for example, giving myself synthetic hormones for a decade or two might not be the best for my health. I wonder whether or not you see that phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's obviously insane to take a whole bundle of supplements and eat organic and so on and so forth, and then take the pill. It's obviously makes no sense.
Yeah.
Unless you're so deep in cognitive dissonance that I don't really know what to say to you. This is obviously incoherent.
So last question. I'm interested to hear just slightly more. You said before that you were originally conceiving of this book in ecological terms. I personally think a lot of people are not yet there. They're not yet ready to wrap their heads around like the ecological what would follow if this argument was made in ecological terms. So let's just hear briefly your thoughts about that, because this is my wheelhouse.
I mean, this is a book I ended up not writing, so I don't really have all the data at my fingertips. But my original concept was, let's say collapse happens, right? Let's say the whole industrial globalized industrial ecosystem implodes and we no longer have like the whole the consumerverse.
Yeah.
How much of feminism is left if you take away disposable nappies and formula milk and washing machines and cars and life-saving devices, etc., 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 etc.? How much of it is actually left? And I said, and the answer is a bit more complicated than none of it.
Right.
But it's actually not much, or considerably less than I would like.
Even me, I love a washing machine.
Right. It's you'll prize my washing machine out of my cold dead hands.
Yeah, exactly.
just so. Phyllis. This is not an original point. Phyllis Schlafly made the point that the women were liberated more by the washing machine than by feminism as such. Mm-hmm. This is her argument. It's kind of a spicy take, and she's probably not completely right. But it
takes a lot of time to wash things by hand.
Right, and one very telling statistic on this that I stumbled on is the fact that if you look at the data, like feminism started demanding that men do an equal share of housework in the 1960s, right? Mm-hmm. But men did not start changing nappies in any meaningful numbers until the 1980s, and when what also happened, perhaps it's a coincidence, but perhaps it's not. What also happened in the 1980s was that you started being able to buy disposable nappies. Mm. So, was it in fact the feminism which persuaded men to start changing nappies, or was it the fact that they no longer had to wash large shitty pieces of cloth and they could just put this thing in the bin?
I love this argument so much.
I mean, it's a fun, yeah. Like, it's not rocket science, is it?
No.
So and then but also going back to the ecological thing, one nappy, it takes 500 years for a disposable nappy to degrade in landfill.
Right.
And in the course of which it leaches all sorts of unspeakable stuff into the water table. This cannot go on indefinitely. Right. This obviously cannot go on indefinitely. So what happens out the other side of disposable nappies? Basis what happened before disposable nappies. When you think it through, you come out somewhere potentially quite different. And I don't know what happens to the relations between men and women at that point, but I'm willing to bet that it doesn't look a great deal like liberal feminism right now.
No, and I would just add, we're kind of doing a thing called collapse now and avoid the rush, which is a John Michael Greer comment. And it's like, and I think it is fundamentally we are sort of forced, my husband and I and our family, to think through the answer to that question. Like, what does it actually look like? And for us, at least as it is now, where we still have the internet and electricity and, most modern conveniences, is a very nice mix of the conveniences of modernity, and also a very nice sort of embodied reality of our masculine and feminine selves. I love being a mother. I feel very powerful being a mother, and I also love writing articles and doing this podcast. So it's it's really it's not as bad. It's not as hopeless, I think, as a lot of people think, but I think there's something actually really beautiful about re-embodying those roles, and has been really, I mean, it was, I think, pretty hard at first, especially because when we first moved into our home, we didn't have running water or electricity for a few weeks. So we were camping basically, but yeah, there's something, I don't know, much more resilient about being embodied and being my full feminine self, and my husband his relatively full masculine self. He just poured a concrete what do they call, slab in the other day, just with his own hands, pouring rock into a mixer, pouring it, and it was just, it's wonderful to see what you can make. Okay, so final thoughts, takeaway for the Zoomers. You know what? Actually, I'll read something from that same Substack, which I loved. You were speaking with, I think, young men, an all boys school. It might be heretical to say, but the true fact that men and women really are different, even if only slightly, this matters. Most people still want love and permanence. There have always been gay and lesbian people, but the default is still heterosexuality. Marriage is good, family is good. It's wrong to treat someone else as an object for your use, especially in the context of sex, even if they say they've consented to it. And rejecting pornography is an act of anti-capitalist resistance. Yeah, it's a great takeaway. Very hopeful, very agentic. Okay, Mary, everybody go get Mary's book, pre-order it. It's going to be a game changer. You'll be way ahead of the curve if you read it and follow her advice. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.